breaking and entering, drunk and disorderly, law and order. A former prosecutor and a defence lawyer, not your typical pairing. And the result? Conversations about crime and punishment that are guaranteed to get you thinking.
Welcome to Justice Matters, a weekly podcast with Lizzie Green and Joe Crowley. Our episodes are available every Monday on Apple Podcasts, Spotify and YouTube. Follow us on Instagram and TikTok at Justice Matters Pod for clips. Enjoy the episode. This episode contains descriptions of violent crimes. Listener discretion is advised. Hello, Lizzie.
Hello, Joe.
How are you?
I'm very well.
That is good. Have you ever been the victim of a crime?
Have I ever been? Well, no, I was very nearly.
Oh.
Yes. This is actually quite shocking. I grew up in Ipswich.
Yes.
And I can remember, actually two things,
Yep.
Good old Ipswich. One time I was walking home from school. I was only in about grade 4 because we used to do that.
Yep.
And I did get totally
Flash.
flashed.
Oh,
by
you
a
have been the
guy.
victim of a crime. There you
And
go.
I think I just laughed. I
Yeah.
wasn't bothered
Yep.
in hindsight, thank God. But the other time I was at Target and I was in the toy aisles, Mum was wherever, and a guy started following me around and I was conscious of it. I must have been about 11, I think.
Yeah.
So I walked a bit quicker and he walked quicker. He actually lunged for me.
Really?
Yep. And he touched my leg
Wow.
and I screamed and ran away. And
Yes.
I won a screaming competition at school. So it was a very loud scream.
Wow.
Yes.
Okay.
So I think that's as close as I've come.
Okay. Wow.
How about you?
I've been a victim of several crimes.
Have you?
Nothing enormously serious, but
Assaults?
no.
Someone's
Oh,
punched you?
sorry. No, I've had. Yeah.
Sorry.
Sure, there've been a lot of people who wanted to. Haven't got their gloves on me yet.
What
No.
crimes?
No. Well, my point really was, we take for granted nowadays, and when I've been the victim of a crime, the first thing I do, go to the police station, report the crime. And so we really take for granted the idea that there's police. I mean, as we should. We live in a modern, wealthy Western democracy. And so, policing is just part and parcel of that. But interestingly, there was a time in the English-speaking world where there was no organised police force.
How long ago are we talking?
So the Peeler men, the Bobbies, the London Metropolitan Police start in 1829. And they are the first properly state organised and paid for police force in the English-speaking world.
Really?
Yeah.
So what happened before then?
Well, that's sort of what I'm going to talk about today.
Okay.
And I'm going to talk about. I've heard of them. I've known about them for years. The Bow Street Runners. So for those watching on YouTube, I'm holding up to the camera The First English Detectives by J.M. Beattie. And it's a history of the Bow Street Runners and policing in London from 1750 to 1840. It's a bit of an academic book. I'm not suggesting people run out and buy it. But
unless they're into that.
Unless you're into that kind of stuff. But I was fascinated because that period of English history at the late 18th, early 19th century, so late 1700s, early 1800s, I'm interested in it, and there's lots of novels that are set around that time, particularly the sort of the Jane Austen, Charlotte Bronte novels.
Yes.
And then one of my other favourite authors, whose name now completely escapes me, she wrote a lot of Regency novels around the Regency period, which is in that early part of the 19th century.
Not Georgette Heyer.
Georgette Heyer, that's it. You've read some Georgette Heyer.
I have. Mum had those on her bookshelf.
Yeah. Love the Georgette Heyer novels.
I can't picture you reading those.
Really?
Joe. Although
Okay,
with your beautiful tie.
My pink tie for those watching
Perhaps
on YouTube.
That was indicative.
Yeah, that's right. I'm a bit of a romantic at heart.
Touching your feminine side.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
But the other thing is, in terms of what we talk about in terms of law, a lot of the things that we sort of are part and parcel of today's life, in some senses are a bit hard to understand, like our system of the use of warrants and arrest warrants and search warrants, but also things like the writ of habeas corpus, which we've talked about a couple of times. And those things, I think, are a bit easier to understand when you understand the history of why and how it is that they developed.
Yeah, okay. Yeah,
So,
we do sort of just take it for granted, don't we?
Yeah. And I mean, I think if we're very strict, as we should be, in terms of use of and police needing things like search warrants to go and search property, or having an arrest warrant to arrest somebody. And these are, hard copy documents that have to be physically signed still, and which is in one way is a bit strange in the 21st century digital age, that you're having to sort of have things, physically signed, and you're having to go to a magistrate and explain to a magistrate why it is, for example, the police should be able to go and search a house.
Do you mean as opposed to the alternative of writing a submission?
No, I mean in terms of the fact that if you are a trained police officer and you come to the conclusion that you need to search a house, why should you have to go off and get a warrant? Why don't you just go and search the house? Now,
Hold on.
Yeah.
Are you saying you're questioning that?
No, I'm not. I mean, I understand the public policy reasons behind it and the importance of the division of power between the executive arm and the judicial arm, and the importance of property rights and all that kind of stuff.
I cannot imagine for 1 second you would be happy if police officers could search a house without a warrant.
No, well, they can search a house without a warrant, as we know.
Sorry, as a matter of course.
As a matter of course, yeah, absolutely, I totally would be. But if you take a step back and you think about, well, do police officers really have to find a magistrate and explain to a magistrate why they need a warrant and blah, 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 blah? In this modern day and age of sort of instant communication, instant technology. And the answer to that is yes, they still do. Yes. And there's very important reasons for that. I'm not saying that they shouldn't do that, but I'm just saying it does seem a bit weird when we have professional magistrates, when we have professional police. But if you look at where it came from, it's completely explicable.
Good. Okay. Because
you thought I'd turned into some
gone completely.
Gone rogue.
Yes. I can imagine you saying no need for warrants.
No, all for warrants.
Okay.
All for warrants.
Oh, phew. I thought, who is this person?
Yeah. So if we jump back to, in fact, if you jump all the way back to the 1740s, that is really when these people called the Bow Street Runners, start to take shape. But let's just have a quick look at a snapshot of what policing is like in London in the 1740s. So the way that public order was kept, back in the day, was a system that had been established by the Statute of Winchester in 1285.
Oh, my goodness.
And so the way that society sort of policed itself was, well, what we would consider rudimentary. But one of the primary rules of policing was the idea of a hue and cry. So I'm sure you've heard of that saying before. Yeah. So that's an actual thing.
And is it to raise a hue and cry?
Yeah.
Yes.
And so the idea is, that whole idea of stop thief. If you are the victim of a crime or you see a crime being committed, you then raise a hue and cry, and it is a responsibility of the other people around you in the population to help in stopping the crime and apprehending the person.
Wow.
So policing is very much a sort of a community responsibility.
So hold on. The courts...
courts haven't even gotten involved at this point, but
so no courts then. So what?
No. So there are courts,
oh, yeah.
but this is sort of at a policing stage. How do we stop crime, or how do we catch perpetrators?
Yes, but so you've got members of the community raising the hue and cry, stopping the thief, and then. Oh, maybe you're going to tell me all of this.
Okay, so then they take the person off to the courts.
Oh, straight to the court themselves.
Straight to the court themselves. Well, again, so nowadays you're like, oh well, the police had put them into custody. But well, there's no police. Where's custody? What does that mean?
That's what I was wondering. Yeah.
So there are jails. So we talked in our episode on modern slavery, and I talked
Willy Wonka.
I talked about Willy Wonka and the idea of private jails.
Yes.
So these private jails do exist.
Okay.
And when I say private jails, I mean they are run for profit. And so you've got to appreciate
who's paying to be held in custody.
Well, that's the problem. The victim of the crime has to pay to have the person held in custody, and or the person being held in custody has to pay for their own custody.
Wow.
Yeah. And
Well,
so you recall I described that sort of workhouse where they were in a jail, but it was also a workhouse so they could work off their debt.
But I guess in one way, unless you really are a victim of a crime, you're not going to be paying for someone to be held in custody.
Yeah.
Like, I guess it would have some kind of test of veracity of a victim's. Well,
yeah, that's right. That's right. If you're prepared to put your money where your
Mm.
mouth is, in terms of your accusations against
That's
people.
right.
But you can see the problem with it because it obviously favours the wealthy and
Of course.
disadvantages the poor.
Yes.
And gives the wealthy an opportunity to, if they've got the money, have people arrested and
Oh, for no reason.
trumped up charges.
So I didn't think of it that way.
Blah, blah, blah.
Yes.
The other aspect to this is it's it's the development of what we sort of know as capitalism and that free market system.
Mm-hmm.
And so the government in this period of about 100 years that I'm going to be talking about, very much against spending public money on things which are nowadays absolute standard practice. So, for example, spending money on policing, spending money on jails.
Right.
And so a lot of the criminal justice system is privately funded. Although that's wrong. I mean, there is an aspect of government money, which I'll talk about. But a lot of it's just privately funded.
Which did that mean that those providing the funding had a say?
Well, I suppose yes and no. I mean, they certainly have an influence on what happens.
Okay.
But you can appreciate also that if the idea of finding and prosecuting is a matter for the victim and often comes down to money, because it's not just that you're paying for the person to be held in custody, you are also paying for all of the steps along that process in terms of court fees,
Right.
because there's no publicly funded courts. Well, I mean, there's a court system set up,
but
that,
no
you're paying
public
the fees.
prosecution.
Yeah, no public prosecution service. So that there's more than just the sort of keeping the person in jail. What if the person is then convicted? You then got a bounty. So one of the things the governments at the time did is on conviction, they would pay £40. But it wouldn't always be £40 to one person. It would be a bit like a reward. And so the court would determine who
was entitled.
Yeah, who was entitled to it.
Interesting.
Yeah. So we have this system where, if you commit crimes, you then have to deal with it all yourself. So what happens if you a crime, for example, a burglary of your house, so you don't have an opportunity to catch the person in the act. You don't know who's done it. How is that then investigated and prosecuted? And the answer is it isn't, unless you take the time to either investigate it yourself or pay somebody else to investigate it for you.
Which is crazy, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely crazy.
Yeah.
And that what develops is this system of thief takers.
So hold on.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm struggling to comprehend this. So if someone is murdered,
yes,
no one's investigating that if the victim's family don't take it on.
Okay, so there are magistrates, and the magistrates were particularly in rural areas, often just a voluntary position of one of the local worthy people who took it on. But in the metropolitan areas tended to become sort of professionals and lawyers who then become magistrates. And they had certain powers. If they took an interest in a case, they could then organise for it to be investigated. But then who are they going to actually do the investigation? They are going to these thief takers and getting them to investigate. And they can issue warrants. So they can issue a search warrant. They can issue arrest warrants.
But so would there have been lots of cases, even involving death, that just went nowhere?
Yeah, absolutely.
Which today seems incomprehensible.
I know.
That someone could kill someone else and just nobody's even investigating.
Yeah, just nothing happens. Bodies being pulled out of the Thames,
That's crazy.
Yeah. I mean, if you're pulling somebody from the Thames, you don't know who they are. Nobody makes a complaint. Well, that's the end of the matter. No.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Okay.
So I'll probably just take a step back at this point, and we'll just look at some of the other mechanisms for policing at this point in time, in sort of 1740s. So one of the things that the book, The First English Detectives, makes clear, and you sort of, when they say it, you're like, oh, that's probably self-evident, but you don't really think about it. There's really two aspects to policing, and that's this idea of preventative policing and then the idea of detection and finding.
So preventative meaning like maintaining law and order. Yeah,
maintaining law and order by really simple things like having people walking the streets at night.
Yeah.
Okay. So again, if you think about London in this period of time, the streets aren't lit at night. So, that idea of ambient light, I mean, anybody who lives in a town or a city now, you're standing outside in the middle of the night, even if there's not a street light near you, there's an ambient light because of all the electricity. So you can appreciate how dark London must have been before street lighting.
Well, we talked about in the Falconio one, the outback, being so dark because we're used to always having light.
Yeah. So, this is a period where nighttime, obviously, a very dangerous time. So this is where we have night watchmen. And again, this is hundreds of years old, the night watchman. And so what do the night watchmen do? So they patrol a particular area and a particular route, and they do it at certain particular times at night. And their job is to walk around and to make sure there's nobody committing crime.
But so who's paying them?
There was some public money, I think, for night watchmen.
So you had to be employed?
Well, the problem is a lot of these positions weren't full-time. So when I talk about parish constables in a second,
so could anyone just go be a night watchman?
No. You were a local worthy in your community, and people were like, we trust you. You be the night watchman, and presumably you had to be a pretty big burly person because
you wouldn't want to do it if you weren't.
No, I know, because I mean nowadays you sort of think, somebody calls out stop thief, and you go and tackle the person who's. You're not yourself thinking, I'm just going to wrestle this person and drag him and put him away. You're thinking, I'll just hold him till the police arrive.
If you could even do that.
Yeah. And so what if there's no police?
You take photos of them.
Yeah. So so whoever these people are who are effecting arrests, you're doing the whole thing yourself. You have to absolutely subdue the person.
Yeah.
And get them all the way to the magistrate and then, get them arrested and put into prison.
Wow.
And don't forget, this is an occasion where there is the death penalty, which means the people who you are trying to arrest are potentially going to be put to death. So they're not going
quietly.
Not going quietly.
No.
So the idea of arresting people is a huge issue, just because of the physical danger that you yourself are put in. So presumably your night watchmen are these big burly blokes.
I know you're saying 1740, but it's not actually that long ago.
No.
That this is how it was.
Yeah. I mean, sort of all of the sort of structures of society that you would, 70% of the structures of society in London now are in place in the 1740s. I mean, the street map is virtually the same.
Is it?
Yeah. Very old areas of London all laid out the same.
Wow. All right, keep going.
So you got your night watchman. Your night watchman walks around and checks doors and windows, makes sure they're locked, and calls out the time. So, 6 o'clock and all is well.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, so this is what the night watchman does, and that is to inform people in their neighbourhood, because they only had their own small little patch, that he was walking the streets and doing this check.
And were they saying the time in case it was a crime so they could pinpoint that it was after the 10 o'clock or?
I think, so their job is definitely not to investigate. And they, I think, had some responsibility to arrest if they found somebody committing a crime.
Right.
But they are definitely not investigating.
Okay.
They are just preventative
Guards.
Policing. They're just walking the streets.
Okay.
And I think probably also for people who are asleep. So you're asleep, you wake up and you hear it's 10 o'clock and all is well. You're like, okay, well, 10 o'clock and all is well. I'll go to sleep. And then it's 2 o'clock and all is well.
If it's waking you.
Sure. Yeah. Probably less annoying than somebody breaking into your house.
Wee Willie Winky.
Oh, really?
Runs through the town.
Yeah. There you go. Yeah. So we have our night watchman service. So that's been running for hundreds of years. And we have our parish constable.
Mm-hmm.
So the parish constable, again, some local worthy in your parish. So part of the problem with policing this time is they're all very geographically based. You only have authority in a very confined geographical area.
Right.
So whatever your parish is or your beat is for your night watchman, whatever the parish is for your parish constable.
Okay.
And the parish constable is, again, some local worthy person who everyone thinks is responsible. And so they do the parish constable job, and it's a volunteer position.
So sorry, when we say parish, like that sounds very religious to me.
Yes.
So it's your...
Yeah, I think it's got some. I didn't look up the definition of what constitutes a parish.
No, but it clearly is tied to your
local church area. Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
And so the parish constables are the ones who have they're the ones who, when a magistrate issues an arrest warrant, they give it to the parish constable to then go and arrest the person.
Right. And is this a full-time job?
No, this is a volunteer position. So
it's not even paid.
No. Well, again, if a crime is successfully prosecuted, there is some money which then can flow back down to.
Wow, they are worthy members of the community,
aren't they?
Yes.
So, and search warrants as well. If, for example, some magistrate got some idea about searching somewhere and issues a search warrant, the magistrate themselves doesn't search. They get the parish constable to go and do the search.
So, I mean, there were people in prisons for many years before this. I actually can't work out how they got there. This system is so flawed.
Yes. Well, they're dragged there.
How did anybody ever get caught and convicted?
Well, they're taken by the parish constable if you can get a magistrate to issue a warrant, or they're taken by a thief taker who you pay them, they drag somebody off to jail, throw them in jail, you pay for them to stay in jail. So absolutely ripe for abuse.
Mm.
But so the parish constable has to have their own income, their own job.
Yes.
Now, sometimes, if they were wealthy enough, they would actually subcontract their parish constable job out. So there'd be the deputy constable who'd go and actually do the work while the local worthy didn't do anything. And just for
the kudos of being the parish constable?
Yeah, I think probably that's you're one of the most upstanding members of the community. But P.S., it didn't sound like a great job because you were responsible for example, crowd control.
Oh.
Yeah, if there's a riot or people, milling around who aren't supposed to be, parish constable's job is to roll up and try and disperse them. That sounds like a dangerous thing to be doing.
I don't know why, as a volunteer position, you'd want it. And if you're going to go to the trouble of deputising someone else, just let them be the parish constable.
And let them go and do it.
Interesting.
And so again, really ripe for abuse because people are, you're not being paid to be the parish constable. And someone's like, listen, can you, come and hang around my shop so no one robs me more? Here's some money for it.
Well, and also if they are deputising other people, like we're saying the parish constable is a worthy person, who's to say they're deputising worthy people?
Well, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And again, if you've got to arrest somebody, that's not a fun job. You're taking your pistol, you're taking your sword.
Oh my gosh.
If you're kicking down somebody's door with a search warrant. But you can appreciate now why, if your parish constable is also the local grocer, because he's got to have your day job, and he comes and searches your house, you'd be like, why is the local grocer searching my house? Hence the need for a warrant from the magistrate. So he can turn up and say, look, the local magistrate.
I've been told.
Yeah, did I have to come in? And you produce the warrant. And then people go, oh, I see you've got some legitimacy. You're not just my local grocer now. You're also the parish constable.
Wow.
So the necessity of these written documents to justify the behaviour of people who are otherwise just like you in the community.
Yes.
They've just taken a volunteer position to be your parish constable.
I actually feel ashamed of myself that I have worked in the law for so long and never once thought of what the origin was.
Yeah. Well, I just knew about the Peeler men, Robert Peel, the English Prime Minister, from the line in The Man from Ironbark.
Oh, really?
A Peeler man who heard the din came in to see the show. So a Peeler man being a police officer, a nickname for police officer, given to them because it was the brainchild of Sir Robert Peel, the Prime Minister.
Yeah, I did know. I knew that there was that sort of history.
Yeah.
And then the Bobbies.
And the Bobbies because his name was Robert Peel.
Yes.
So, yeah.
But no, I've never thought of the origins of a warrant. That's so interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we've got our night watchmen.
Yes.
We've got our parish constables. We also have our there's the bailiffs.
Mm-hmm.
So we still have bailiffs nowadays.
Yes.
And they're nowadays attached to courts. They had a broader role back in the day in terms of being attached to what we would sort of term local councils, but which were really the sort of the local landed gentry, and they could go around and collect rents and all that kind of stuff.
Yes, and wasn't it a bailiff who would come and turf you out if you were in arrears for your rent?
For your rent and that kind of stuff. So they were sort of enforcing, but they're enforcing the civil law, not the criminal law.
Mm-hmm.
So they don't have a huge role in doing this kind of stuff, except, I mean, insofar as they've got power to come and seize property or to turf you out of your property.
Right.
So they do have some, level of state
but not
power.
For the crime stuff
No.
so much.
And then the other ones, which I found really interesting, and I would love to have been one of these people. Well, I think a Bow Street runner would have been fun, but they were the marine police or the river police.
Oh.
Yeah. So interestingly, there's an organised water police force before there's an organised land police force.
Okay, I'm just reminded of your love of boats.
I love boats.
Here we're back to the boats.
Yes, that's right. We're back to the boats.
Yes.
So this is on the River Thames. So London, obviously a huge mercantile centre, enormous amount of river traffic coming in from all parts of the world to buy and sell goods in London. So the policing of ships on the River Thames, so they had people stealing stuff off them, was very important. So important that the government actually did fund these people.
Wow.
I know.
Before the land
police. Yes.
Okay. But I suppose it's a lot of money at stake.
Yeah, again. Well, so Napoleon says in around this time, in the early 1800s, he calls the English a country of shopkeepers. And the idea behind that is that the English are obsessed with money, and it's just all about money and making money. And I think there's some truth to that.
When Napoleon wasn't about money and power.
Well, but the marine police or these water police, they again are a joint private and government exercise. So one of the big trading companies pays sort of half the salary, and the government pays the other half because it's
not
in
a conflict of interest.
It's the government's interest to make sure that all of this mercantile traffic
smoothly.
is protected. But again, with these water police or the marine police, they are preventative policing. So their idea is that they're in a uniform, they're on the boats, they're visible, and in that sense deter crime.
Yeah, okay.
So they're not really there to investigate crime
or solve
crime. They're there to, I'm sure they probably did a bit of that, but really their main task is to be seen and to stop people stealing stuff off.
Yeah, so I assume if they saw something, they'd arrest them.
Yeah. And so you could do citizen's arrest. So, I mean, part of the Statute of Winchester in 1285 is all this stuff about citizen's arrest. And
so was the marine police deemed a citizen's arrest still?
I'm not exactly sure. It's all a bit of a grey area about what powers these different people had.
Right. And was that written down? Like, did they have?
I don't think so.
No.
I mean, there's no sort of Marine Police Act of 1753 or something.
It's a shame. That would be a good one.
No. Well, I'm not sure people are although questions of lawful arrests is obviously something that comes up, hence the need for warrants and hence the need for searches. So these things are being argued in
but for
in the courts.
Most part, just accept it as how it is.
Yeah, well, I suppose you're dragging in people who are pretty uneducated and pretty poor. So really what legal arguments are they going to be raising?
Gosh.
So then we have these, so they're the real, and then the thief takers. So we get those sort of four aspects to policing back in the 1700s, 1740s, about the time the Bow Street runners start up. So I just want to talk a little bit about thief taking and the problems with this system. So the idea is a thief taker is a professional who will investigate crimes for you.
All crimes?
Yeah, whatever you pay them to do.
So not just thieves?
No, so they'll call thief takers, but I think they'd take murderers or rapists or arsonists.
Yeah, right.
Anyone. The problem, and so the way they got paid is you paid them privately or you convinced them to take your case on and then they would on
Take the
successful
bounty.
prosecution, take the bounty. Yes.
So is a thief taker the old version of
a bounty hunter? Well, they were sort of, I think the bounty hunters are more of an American idea, but it's a similar idea. And bounty hunters tended to focus more on bail jumpers. So
that's right.
You are given bail on a surety. You pay £50 or whatever into the court that you'll turn up next time to court. And if you don't turn up next time to court, that $50 or £50 is then forfeited.
Yes.
Or it's the bounty, and so that's the bounty that people then catch you, and then they get the $50.
I read a side note. I'm still reading. I hope she's still writing them. The best books. They're so funny. Like I literally laugh out loud about a bounty hunter.
Oh yeah.
They're by Janet Ivanovich, and her bounty hunter is called Stephanie Plum. If anyone's looking for light crime comedy, honestly,
there you go. You've heard it here.
No,
Stephanie Plum.
Stephanie Plum's the character.
Is this? They made a movie about it?
They did. Don't go by that. That was Katherine Heigl.
Yeah, I thought it was quite a good film.
Oh, I haven't seen it because honestly, in my mind, Katherine Heigl is not Stephanie Plum.
Oh, okay.
No, but the books, like, sometimes you just can't help it. You're on a plane or wherever and you laugh out loud. That is what Janet Ivanovich does in her books.
Okay.
Yeah.
You've heard it here, people.
Anyway, totally irrelevant, really.
No, that's all right. So these thief takers are working effectively on a bounty system, although, sorry, you can pay them privately. They'll take your case on if you pay them. So the problem is, well, there's a couple of problems with it, but it's the incentives in doing the job are all financial. So it is absolutely ripe for corruption. And so what form does the corruption take? Well, if you are a thief taker and you know who the thieves are who've stolen the goods, then it's easy for you to get the goods back, particularly if the thieves worked for you.
Oh.
So
wow.
Yeah. So there's this sort of.
So you're setting up a scam.
Correct. So you become effectively a kingpin of crime where you control all the criminals and then you are paid to solve the crimes which you have organised to occur.
Okay, but so if the property is returned, do they not take the thief, like the physical thief, to the court?
Well, they don't necessarily, they can say, oh, we found your property, just couldn't catch the bloke.
Right.
Or you go and grab one of the thieves who doesn't work for you.
Oh.
And you say, yeah, here's the thief here. And that person's put on trial. And guess who gives the evidence against that person?
The thief taker.
The thief taker.
Wow.
So these thief takers are then the principal witnesses in the trials.
Is this how the mafia started?
Oh, I don't know.
Sounds like a business model for...
Doesn't it? Yeah, exactly.
Gang operations.
You can see that the thief takers, who are then the principal witnesses against the accused, hopelessly conflicted because they want a conviction because they only get paid, the bounty's only paid on conviction.
Right.
So, again, huge financial incentive to just say whatever they need to say.
Rife for corruption.
And they get a terrible reputation.
The thief takers.
Yeah, absolutely terrible reputation.
Right.
And it becomes, and so what the judiciary do to try and, make this less financially viable for them is that when they're divvying up the £40 reward, they are giving most of it actually to the victim and they give less and less to the thief taker themselves.
Right. So there's less motivation.
Yes, but then there's more motivation in the thief taker to make money other ways by, for example, fencing stolen goods, being paid to have goods, returned, whole series of other things.
Goodness me.
So it gets to the point where, like the 1720s, there's a guy called Jonathan Wild, and he becomes, and this is an official title, the Thief Taker General.
No.
Yeah. And he works at the courts, and you go to him, and he then, helps to organise your, to help investigate, solve. But he is the head of a huge criminal organisation.
Oh my God, you got to love human nature.
Yeah. But having said that, he was personally quite brave and he also did actually solve real crimes and he did stop real crimes.
Right.
But that was just a sort of a side note to his job.
More lucrative.
Yes. Yeah. Being horribly corrupt. Anyway, this all comes unstuck for him and it's eventually found out and he's hanged at Tyburn.
He gets hanged for it.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Or is this the blood?
This is the blood code. You get hanged for everything.
Wow.
I know. I mean, and this is the irony of the blood code, that they're hanging people for being a pickpocket. Everybody's standing around watching these pickpockets being hanged, in the crowd of pickpockets, picking the pockets of people, watching pickpockets get hanged. I mean, it's so, it was just so ludicrous that the death penalty was some kind of deterrent.
Yeah. Yeah. No deterrent. Mm-hmm.
So, we have this system where investigation of crime is really privately done, and it's really done through these thief takers. And then, you have the position of magistrates, and then onto the higher courts, and the emergence of the jury trial and defence counsel, as we sort of see them now, and the kinds of rules around jury trials that we see now are all developing around this time. Enter Henry Fielding. So Henry Fielding.
Was he an author?
Bingo.
Yes.
Very good. Tom Jones.
Yes.
Some say the first modern novel written around this time, the 1740s.
Okay.
So he's a lawyer, barrister, playwright. His plays are banned from being put on because they're very anti-establishment. But he also has friends in the establishment. So after his plays are banned, he turns to novels, writes the novel Tom Jones, which is a fantastic novel. And then he also takes a job as a magistrate.
Right.
Yes, and he takes a job as the magistrate for, where is the Parliament building? Oh, Westminster.
Oh, okay.
Magistrate for Westminster.
Very flash.
And interestingly, the magistrates' proceedings were not in a court; they were just in their house.
Their own house.
Their own house, and they weren't open to the public.
But actually, I think I remember there must have been a movie or something, and they went to the magistrate's house with their accused person.
Yeah, so that's what happens. You'd have to take the magistrate to the accused's house. Sorry, to the magistrate's house. You'd have to take the accused to the magistrate's house.
Yes, yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so Henry Fielding, and he takes this job and he's told that he will be paid £500 a year, but that's not paid by the government.
Was that a lot back then?
Yeah. That's a lot. Oh,
very,
that's good. That's
very
a good
lucrative.
Living. Yeah. But he would make that money through court fees, because obviously every time you do something in court, you've got to pay the filing fee.
Oh, yeah, okay.
But what he realised is that you would make the money through court fees and being totally corrupt. And so, in fact, he ran it by the book and only made £300. But he becomes incredibly interested in magisterial work and what he's doing and how to improve it.
Even while he's abusing the system.
No, he's not abusing the system. He's doing it properly.
Did you just say he was corrupt?
No, not corrupt. He's not corrupt.
Oh, he's not.
No.
Good. Okay.
He's a very worthy novelist.
Oh, so he could have gotten more money, but he didn't.
But he didn't.
Okay.
Yes.
Sorry, I thought you were saying he took things off the books and only declared the
No. He only did things by the books.
Okay, right. Good.
So he gets his house, and the house is at Bow Street in Covent Garden.
Ah, here we go.
Yes. So what he very innovative man. So he decides, firstly, they've got a big room downstairs, and him and his family live upstairs. He's going to make that the court. And he turns it into more something that looks more like what we would consider a court.
Okay.
And because he's entitled to examine witnesses, because he's got to determine whether to lay charges and things like that.
Yes.
So because there's no police force nowadays, police determined to lay charges.
Yeah.
So that's originally done by the magistrates, and they have to do it by looking at the evidence, talking to the witnesses, and then making a decision. So he also makes that process open to the public, so people can come and watch the process occurring. But the other thing is this is a private house, and so a lot of the magistrates, you go and you're robbed. You manage to catch the person who's robbed you. As I say, nowadays you take them to the police station. Back then, where do you take them? To the magistrates. Well, the magistrates, it's their house, and they wouldn't necessarily answer the door. They're not.
Oh, really?
There's no obligation on them to be open.
And how would everyone know where they lived?
Oh, I think they sort of advertise where they live.
Okay.
So he was very much about making sure that that there were people manning the sort of the house, so that you could certainly go from early in the morning to late at night, and there would be people there to take your complaint.
Oh, he's very good.
And in fact, you could go any day except Sunday, although you could go Sunday if it was an emergency. And although technically it wasn't open 24 hours, people certainly would still do, and he would still. He didn't do it personally. There's a problem, so he then employs the staff. But guess who's paying for the staff?
Him.
Him, because the government's not funding it.
He must have had a very patient wife.
I would have thought so, yeah. He sounds
letting
like
everyone into the bottom of their house.
Bottom of their house.
Any time of day or night.
Well, apparently he also used to work for, I've got to love this, the pub across the road. Oh. The Brown Bear. So people knew if he wasn't at his house, just go across the road to the pub. And he used to interview, witnesses and stuff at the Brown Bear. And if you turned up with your accused person and, you couldn't get in, you could sit in the Brown Bear and wait for them to just.
Oh my God, I love this guy.
I know.
Yeah.
So he now decides, I need some people to help me do this investigating.
Yes.
And so what he does is he finds out who the best local parish constables are, and he then employs them. And so he gets 6 guys, and they become the first of what are later to be called the Bow Street Runners. And so they become professional detectives, hence J.M. Beattie from this book, calling them the first detectives. So they are then not about the prevention of crime by
investigation.
Yeah, they're on the investigative side. Okay. So they were sort of more worthy, more honest thief takers effectively, but they're working on the same system because they get paid through the bounty that is then if on a successful conviction.
Yes. So then is this their job?
This becomes their full-time job.
Okay.
And Henry Fielding's amazing. He only lasts a couple of years. He passes away. His younger brother, John Fielding, Sir John Fielding, takes over and expands and does an even better job than Henry Fielding as this magistrate. And John Fielding is blind. Yeah, the blind magistrate.
Fully blind?
Yeah, so apparently he could identify, 600 different criminals just by their voice. Yeah, amazing guy.
That's insane.
So
you would love that evidence in court, Joe.
I know. I'd absolutely go through that bit of voice recognition evidence.
Yeah.
But it's amazing how small the number of people, because the government, Henry Fielding writes to the government, says, will you help me fund this? And the government sort of give him some ad hoc payments about paying the the thief takers, but the Bow Street Runners, but they're really working off the money they get in bounties or in private fees. So you could privately employ them to go and invest, a bit like a private investigator to go and investigate it. But the other thing is he writes manuals for them and he develops questioning techniques.
John or Henry?
Henry. And then I think John then expands on it.
Okay.
But he invents the police lineup. Yeah.
Really?
Isn't that amazing? So they come up with this idea about how to properly identify people.
So he must have been a very fair-minded person.
Yeah.
To be thinking of all of those perspectives and make it practice.
Yeah.
That's so important, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
One of the few things that he does early on is there's a highway robbery, so the highwayman who holds up the stagecoach, that's a huge problem around this time. And so there's gangs of highway robbers.
Yes.
So the Bow Street Runners advertise that they can be out and investigating within 15 minutes of a complaint being made.
That's hilarious.
Isn't it amazing? So complaint comes in, a coach full of rich men is on the way back from the races or something, and they get held up. One of them is beaten very badly. Another one is shot and killed. And so there's sort of 6 highwaymen that are at large. And so one of the earliest jobs that the Bow Street Runners do is Henry Fielding he says to them, right, get your pistols, get your, swords, get out there, find out who did and arrest them. And so they do a bit of, I think, good old-fashioned head kicking in pubs, find out who it is, arrest them all, bring them in. And so they solve that case. Those people all get charged and hanged, and that's becomes a really big deal because this scourge of highway robbery, is
when there would have been a lot of bounties.
Yeah. 6 people at £40 a head.
Yeah.
Assuming you're getting all the £40. But another one that he does early on is a whole lot of sailors come into his area. So he's only got jurisdiction in
his parish.
In his parish, in Westminster, although he does also get the job as magistrate of Middlesex or something. He organises that, so he's got a second jurisdiction.
Yeah.
Anyway, so he organises that. A whole lot of sailors come in from a ship and they go into Westminster and they get ripped off, they say, by some of the local prostitutes. So what do you do when that happens? You obviously have a riot and start burning places down.
Yeah.
So again,
par for the course.
Yeah, par for the course. So again, he gets his Bow Street runners, makes sure they're all armed, and he gets out there and they arrest, 6 or 7 of them and put them on trial and successfully have them convicted.
So he's making a little name for his Bow Street boys.
And so one of the other things he does is he, being a writer, starts a newspaper, the Covent Garden News or Gazette or something. And that is to write stories about crimes. So not only is he advertising his own successes, but unsolved crimes he's putting in the information about so people can come forward.
Information.
Property that's been found that hasn't been claimed.
He was very
amazing.
Forward-thinking.
Yeah. And, for example, having victims come in and look at who they've got in custody in case they say, oh, yeah, that person also robbed from me. And so
I find this amazing.
Yeah.
So he really is the founder of police.
Yeah.
And yet never have I only knew him as an author.
Yeah, yeah. I know, it's amazing. So when you say the founder of the police, so he passes away. The Bow Street Runners actually get disbanded for a little while because they just don't have the money and they have to go back to their day jobs. John Fielding takes it over and he makes it better and they get regular income and then they're being funded a bit more by the state more regularly.
Yeah.
And I think he gets up to 80 of them at one stage. He gets a big force of them. But don't forget, this is only in metropolitan areas. This is only in London.
Yes.
So, I mean, presumably policing in all of the other
is still
just
non-existent.
the thief-taker system. And Anyway, this goes, so that starts in 1840. It's not till
1740.
1740. It's not till 1829 that the Peeler men come in,
the
police
come in.
Later. Yeah, so it's a long time later, and there's lots of different pushes. The British or the English are a bit against the idea of a organised police force for 2 reasons. One, the French do it, but the French police, who'd been around since the 1600s, was a part of the army. Okay. And so it was seen as just a tool of the executive arm of government or the crown or the monarchy to maintain order.
Yeah.
And so the English, with their natural desire for freedom and liberty, are really against any kind of government organised force.
Okay.
So that's problematic. The other thing is that the military had been called out a couple of times for different riots, particularly the Peterloo massacre. Not good.
Right.
So I can't remember.
Extreme.
Well, yes, because you call out military people to deal with a civil problem. And the military, obviously, they're trained to kill.
Yes.
They're not trained to de-escalate. They're not trained to,
negotiate.
The redcoats turn up at Peterloo and just massacre people.
Right.
So
that would put the public off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's, I think, part of the reason why it takes so long. But eventually Robert Peel, who has a couple of goes at different police forces, he starts one in Ireland, which is not great and is not particularly, again, it's quite a repressive instrument of the Irish rule.
Right.
Anyway, he manages to get it all going, and they start the system of the Metropolitan Police, which is just the London police, and they are started in the Act is passed in 1829, and they originally wear top hats.
Oh, bless.
Yeah, well, because they wanted to appear unthreatening.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, because they were gentlemen.
Because they were gentlemen, and they didn't wear red coats because they didn't want to look like the military, so they wear blue coats.
Yes.
With tails.
So fancy.
I know, and they were not armed because of the whole issue against Peterloo massacre.
But remember when we talked about the gun control?
Yeah.
And even for some of those massacres in the, not that long ago, they weren't armed.
Still not armed. Yeah, they've got a truncheon or something, I think they had. But they don't have guns.
No.
Still don't have guns.
No.
That's for the general Bobby on the street. And they became both, well, actually, when they first start, the police are really about preventative policing. So the idea is they get their uniforms on and they walk the streets. And obviously they're helped by the fact that the streets are mostly lit now in London.
Yes.
So all of those things sort of help improve the state of policing. They later move into more of the detection side, again, helped by the Bow Street Runners.
So I was going to ask, whatever Henry wrote down as a guide, was that preserved? Did it become any part of modern policing?
Yeah, I don't know. I'd be interested to see.
I don't know what he was writing.
I know, these questioning techniques.
Yes.
And,
well, to come up with the lineup,
the police
and that
lineup.
sort of thing. Yes.
Yeah. So So the Bow Street Runners exist at the same time as the Metropolitan Police, and it takes a couple of more decades for the Bow Street Runners just to fade out and disappear.
Right.
And then the sort of the Metropolitan Police really do it. And that idea of policing then takes root in all of the other systems, towns around England, and we then have the modern sort of policing system that we have.
But still with the warrant?
Still the warrant.
Yes.
I know. So in case the local grocer turns up and wants to search you, you need to why he's searching your house is because he's got a warrant from the magistrate.
That is just so interesting.
Yeah.
Never knew any of that.
Yeah, it is interesting, isn't it? So there you go. There was some TV. There was a TV show I think called The Bow Street Runners. I haven't watched it.
I haven't watched it.
Anyway, I'm sure it'll be exciting. Great.
We're always recommending
things to look at.
Yes.
Yeah.
We're very good like that.
I know. We should get sponsored more.
Joe, that was really good.
Yeah, good. All right. Thanks,
you.
Lizzie. Thank you for listening to the episode. If you enjoyed it, please rate and review or like and subscribe. It all helps Lizzie and I keep this podcast going. If you're interested in clips, you can look at them on Instagram and TikTok. Just search for Justice Matters Pod. See you next episode.